Believe me when I say this, don't envy every rich man or woman that you come across, because most of it is ill-gotten wealth. Let's have a look at this cover of the Daily Nation, for example, and I quote, 39 billion scam. US agents target Kenyan properties. On to the subheader, payback. Payback since 2022. Kenya has featured in courts in the US state of Minnesota during a 39 billion corruption trial. Masterminds of the COVID-era scandal invested part of the cash stolen from the US taxpayers in Kenya, buying high-end apartments and luxury resorts. Now, with their conviction, US authorities are on the trail of the ill-gotten wealth, and you can see an individual called Abdiaziz Farah, Abdi Majid Noor, Mukhtar Sharif, Hayat Noor, and Mohammed Ismail. Then right next to Mohammed Ismail, there's another text which reads, Karibu Palms Resort in Diani, which convict Liban Alishire bought using part of his stolen 315 million. He agreed to surrender the property. So let me explain how this scam works. Picture this. At the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, when schools were closed and fear was everywhere, the US government released emergency funds meant for hungry children. The program was called Feeding Our Future. It was meant to be a simple, noble cause where the US government gave out meals to low-income kids because they could no longer eat at school under shutdown. Now here's where the plot thickens. Some goons from Minnesota came up with a non-profit organization called Feeding Our Future, and guess what? The state of Minnesota trusted those goons to oversee millions of dollars from the federal child nutrition program. And instead of distributing food, the Feeding Our Future non-profit started approving fake food sites which claimed to be feeding thousands of children every day. In some sites, they claimed to be serving 3,000 meals, 5,000 meals, or even 10,000 meals daily. But in reality, there were no children and there was no food. It was all just a big scam. Now in comes the second question. Where did the money go to? First up, right here in Nairobi, Kenya, a high-rise apartment building was purchased, specifically in the South Sea neighborhood near Nairobi National Park. According to the DOJ, Department of Justice, that is, another defendant bought an aircraft in Nairobi using the same funds. You go to Diani, another one of these shifty individuals allegedly wired $216,000 towards purchasing Karibu Palms Resort in Diani Beach, just right next to the Indian Ocean. Still on the US Department of Justice report, some of the funds were also used to buy land in Mandera town along the border with Somalia and Ethiopia. Again, let me reiterate, don't envy wealthy men and women. For some of them, we just never know how they came about those funds. These are people who are going to scam taxpayers abroad to then come and wash the money in this country. You have heard of South Sea, you have heard of Diani, you've heard of Mandera town. Others are even buying planes and they are chartering them to us. These are some of the things which need to be recouped by the US and Kenyan government, sold, and then we share the spoils. Sababu hii pesa hatuwezi rudishia wa America much as ni yao. The crime was committed on both countries. The funds were stolen in America, invested in Kenya. We will seize them, sell them, tukatane katikati nusu nusu, because that is what they would have done in America anyway. I don't think they'd send it all the way back to Kenya if at all. And this is what's going on in this country, left, right, center. Scammers si wale pekee wako Minnesota. Even this housing program, kuna watu wanakulia illegally. Overpricing cement, overpricing chuma ya D10, D12, D8, overpricing BRT. Everything is through the roof for the sake of somebody getting kickbacks and stealing from the nation. As we deal with these people who stole from America, we must also ask ourselves, who are these people who are currently stealing from this republic? Because pia wale wanaiba Kenya ni exchange program. Hawa wanaiba huko wanaleta hapa. Wetu wanaiba hapa wanapeleka Dubai na kwingine. So we must also start looking into that. But anywho guys, let's see what Kenyans on X had to say about this, and I quote.
Hello everyone, I hope that you are doing fine this second day of 2026. Allow me to wish you a happy new year 2026 filled with God's blessings. I also want to thank you for your massive support, subscribing, liking and sharing my videos. For my subscribers and my new viewers, feel most welcome. So the last time I posted a video about the child care fraud involving the Somalis, and today there is a growing conversation online and in investigative cycles about the alleged fraud happening in the United States, particularly involving government aid, welfare systems, and also public funds. What has caught so many people's attention is not just about the fraud itself, but what allegedly happens next. Many observers claim that after the money is acquired from the United States, it quickly disappears to real estate investments in Kenya. And now we see that not the Somalis alone, but now today Kenya is involved as well. Now, let's be clear. Note that every Somali person is involved in the fraud. And note that every real estate investor is doing something illegal. But when these patterns keep repeating themselves, then now we are left curious. What is happening? Welcome to Polito Realities, a channel that digs deep to what people fear to talk about. If you believe in truth, accountability, and open discussion, then this channel is for you. Today, we are digging deep, so stay tuned for us to unwrap what we have today.
The Asset Recovery Agency will be engaged from the point of seizure, and all assets used or acquired through these activities, including cash, vehicles, land, buildings, and businesses, will be treated as proceeds of crime, promptly frozen, prosecuted, forfeited to the state, and redirected.
That money in Minnesota that they scammed, you know where it went to? They brought up city blocks in Eastleigh, Nairobi, Kenya. Check this out.
Somali people, you must tell us where you're getting this money. And I can tell you, every street in Eastleigh right now has more than 10 buildings under construction. You'll see these buildings covered with nets and under construction and not yet complete, or at least recently completed. Every street. And remember, Eastleigh has 12 streets. First street, second street, all the way to 12. And every street has like 10 high-rise apartments under construction or recently finished construction. Somali people have money. These people have money. I don't know what they do, how they do it. I think they're trying to make Eastleigh a city of its own in Nairobi, man.
He said buildings, like blocks of high-rise buildings being constructed. And that video is from 2023. Oh, where did all the money come from? Well, that money came from Minnesota, buddy. That's where all the money went, to buy up city blocks of high-rise apartments and business complexes. You see, they making that into a little Somalia right there in Kenya. That's where majority of the money went. Look what I found in the Kenyan newspaper, y'all. This is U.S. agents tracing Somali fraud money in Minnesota back to Kenya. This is their USD. This number right here in alphabets, this is $250 million plus, but they're tracing all the money back to residential and commercial properties in Kenya that they're planning on ceasing. They have a agreement with the Kenyan government. So the Kenyan government is in cooperation with the United States. They have a mutual agreement treaty that they both signed. You have the FBI out there. You have the IRS investigation division that's working on this. And you have the DOJ that's working on this. Now, what I find interesting is, so far, all that Somali scam money that they traced to Kenya to buy real estate and commercial properties, none of that money they invested in their own infrastructure. The money that they found that was sent back to Somalia was towards Al-Shabaab, to create more chaos, to create more violence. But to actually build the infrastructure and invest in Somalia, even though this money is they obtained this money fraudulently, they never took none of that money back to invest back in Somalia, except the further destruction of Somalia. That's just a random thought. But yeah, they thought they got away with this, but all this property is about to be seized. Trust and believe all his property is about to be seized because the Kenyan government is cooperating with the United States.
Somalis have taken over the entire government of Minnesota. I'm not exaggerating. You are about to witness the disturbing reality that every level of government in Minnesota, from the governor's office to the courts, to the police forces, to the city councils, have been infiltrated and are being controlled by Somalis. And that's precisely how they got away with stealing over $9 billion. Make sure you watch this till the end. As always, like the video and subscribe to the channel. But let's start with a Minnesota judge overturning a guilty verdict for a Somali man who stole over $7 million in taxpayer money.
Big reversal in a $7.2 million fraud case in Hennepin County. The judge has thrown out the jury's guilty verdict.
This wasn't some technical hiccup. These fraudsters, Abdelfatah Yusuf and Lul Ahmed, were convicted on 6 counts of charges, months of evidence, a jury that deliberated for hours, all erased in one ruling.
Yusuf and his wife, Lul Ahmed, were charged with stealing $7.2 million of taxpayer money through Medicaid overbilling in a personal care assistant or PCA scam. The couple allegedly spent tens of thousands of the fraud money.
And here's the part that rattled people inside the system. The judge didn't say the fraud didn't happen. She said the state couldn't prove who was responsible, which raised this question on everyone's minds. If a case this obvious can't hold, what happens to the rest? Because this ruling hit while Minnesota is already buried under billion-dollar fraud scandals, overseas money trails, and growing federal probes into how taxpayer money keeps disappearing. And here's the twist most people missed. Once that verdict collapsed, the issue stopped being one defendant. It became about whether Minnesota's system can still enforce fraud at all, or whether the feds are stepping in because the state no longer can.
When even the judges adhere to a two-tiered system of law and order that provides preferential treatment to Somali foreign nationals and overturns guilty verdicts made by juries that were provided insurmountable evidence to prove the guy is guilty, it means you are being conquered. And the consistent theme you'll see throughout this entire video is Minnesota is in fact being conquered. And the Somali community has warped the entire system in Minnesota to their sole benefit. The Somali community has claimed Minnesota as a territory of Somalia. And because they don't have rule of law back in Somalia, they demand being excluded and excused from being bound by the rule of law here. But here's the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota, the second most powerful politician in the entire state, right under Tim Walz, a white Catholic lady wearing a hijab and speaking Somali and saying Minnesota is actually Somalia. Watch.
Assalamu alaikum. My name's Peggy Flanagan. I am the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota, and I'm really honored and humbled to be here with all of you today. I am incredibly clear that the Somali community is part of the fabric of the state of Minnesota. I think about my friendship with Nimco. We've been friends for almost 25 years. And when I think of being part of Minnesota and growing up here, the Somali community has always been a part of my Minnesota. So I want to just encourage the community to know that we're with you. We've got your back. I am here shopping today.
I'm calling for the denaturalization and deportation of every Somali engaged in fraud in Minnesota. Emmer's post comes after this viral video alleging nearly a dozen daycare centers in Minnesota of fraud.
The rhetoric that's right now online on social media that is racist and targeting of our community should not be policy.
Here's what Emmer had to say on Fox News.
Not all Somalis are criminals, I'll give you that. But 90% of the people being charged with these crimes, Jason, are from the Somali community.
Hamline University political science professor David Schultz says the law is clear.
Deportation is only for aliens, not for U.S. citizens, that U.S. citizens can't be deported, and that revoking people's citizenship is also unconstitutional. And this all goes back to the 14th Amendment.
The Somali community has decided to respond to the American public learning about their massive fraud schemes that total in the billions of dollars by holding a press conference where we're supposed to feel bad for them. But here's the thing. It didn't go as planned. The entire thing was a massive backfire, starting with this clip of a mother who stands there and says the truth instead of lying and then has a literal heart attack on stage. Here we go.
If childcare is cut, I'm unable to work or go to school. I understand fraud is bad.
This is how endemic fraud is in the Somali community. You can't just say fraud is bad. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. She looks like she was about to be excommunicated for simply saying fraud is bad. And then everybody claps, and all the liberal white ladies clapping. And by the way, those liberal white ladies, they're daycare workers. One of them hopped up on the mic and did the exact same thing. Here we go.
And I do see some signs over here that say stop fraud, and I agree, stop it. There are wait lists for these programs that are years long. There is fraud, fraud in the White House.
Yeah, when Trump said they're not sending their best, this is what he's talking about. But it gets even more unbelievable. Somali fraud daycare owner hopped up on stage and decided to announce that his daycare had been broken into, and guess what the burglar stole? All of his employment records and all of the records of the children getting checked in. Those would, of course, be the records that the feds would use to put him in prison. And while he's sitting there sobbing, trying to make you feel sorry for him, people on the internet notice that he's wearing a $3,000 pair of glasses, designer glasses, some of the most expensive glasses you can buy. These glasses are like $50, by the way. I wouldn't even know what to do with a $3,000 pair of glasses, but this Somali scammer is literally wearing glasses more expensive than maybe your car, certainly more expensive than my first car. So, yeah, I don't feel bad. And I won't feel bad when they're denaturalized and deported, which is exactly what needs to happen.
Welcome back again to our discussions. And for so many people who look at Somalis, the places they live, the luxurious cars they are driving, and the business they own, you may think that these people are honestly hardworking. But when we hear about the fraud cases involving them, we become confused as well. For so many years, the United States has spent billions of dollars on public assistance programs, refuge support, and social services. These programs are honestly meant to help vulnerable people rebuild their lives. However, investigations and whistleblowers have repeatedly exposed cases where these systems are abused. Some reports allege that fake identities were used, false claims were filed, and also benefits were collected illegally. Again, these are investigations, but what alarms many people is what happens afterward. Observers claim that large sums of money leave the U.S. and reappear in real estate investments abroad, including Kenya. Expensive apartments, commercial buildings, and land purchases have raised eyebrows, especially when buyers appear to have no visible source of legitimate income. Kenya's real estate market has grown rapidly, and while foreign investment is legal, dirty money distorts the economy. It drives prices up, locks locals out of home ownership, and turns property into a laundering tool instead of development. The bigger issue here is accountability. Why are so many fraud cases aggressively prosecuted while others are ignored? Why do journalists who investigate these stories face pushback? Remember the last case of child care. Nick Shirley did his work. But we hear that he was kidnapped and disappeared. What does that mean? It means that these fraud cases are there, but they don't want to be exposed. Why are discussions labeled as hate instead of being addressed with facts? The last case we saw, the Somalis were involved in child care frauds, but thereafter they came saying that they are discriminated. Honestly, is that discrimination when you find people involved in huge frauds like that? This is not about attacking a community. This is about protecting the taxpayers, protecting the Kenyan's economy, and demanding transparency. If fraud is happening, it should be exposed no matter who is involved. Silence only protects corruption, and that's why conversations like this matter. Thank you for being this part of this conversation. If you feel that the conversation touched you, leave your thoughts in the comment sections. Until next time, be informed, be grounded. But don't forget to subscribe, to like, and to share today's video. Until next time, be blessed.